What are the best archetypes in Pathfinder 2nd edition? Which ones are they? And are any of them your type? I kind of hope so, or this video is a giant waste of time. This is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder 2nd edition. In this video chapter, I've chosen 10 of what I believe are some of the best archetypes in Pathfinder 2e. I've tried to vary these sorts of archetypes that I've chosen, so hopefully most character builds can get some use out of this list. And as always, this list is in no particular order. I'm going to start with an initial explanation as to what archetypes actually are, and then we'll get into the list proper, in which I'll go over prerequisites and some of the best feats for the archetype in my opinion. Quick note, a dedication is a feat that grants access to an archetype and its feats, so don't get confused if I mention both terms a lot. And I've deliberately not chosen multi-class archetypes due to some of them being very powerful in my opinion, which would make this list kind of boring. Exemplar and Champion are just two examples of this. As ever, if you find this video helpful and or informative, please give a like, comment and subscribe so I can keep doing it. Okay, cue the music. Right, so what is an archetype and how do you get one? I usually explain archetypes by saying that they are sort of like half or mini classes. Generally speaking, you can access dedication feats at level 2 in exchange for one of your class feats, and these dedication feats effectively allow you to start nabbing feats from said archetypes. Each archetype comes with unique feats or feats shared from other archetypes or classes. Generally speaking though, you're sort of picking a mini class and grabbing thematic feats and abilities from that mini class. There are over 150 archetypes in PF2e, which is a little bit crazy, and we get more and more added pretty regularly. This means that there's more than likely at least one archetype out there which is going to be perfect for whatever sort of character you want to build. Do note that once you pick a dedication feat, you have to spend another 2 feats in that archetype to be allowed access to another. So if you took a dedication feat at level 2 and kept nabbing your archetype feats as soon as you're able, you'd usually need to be level 8 before you jump into another archetype, but this does mean that you can have multiple dedications and archetypes as you level, which is honestly amazing and drastically opens up character build options. Also bear in mind that some archetypes come with specific skill feats instead of class feats. This means that if you choose these skill feats, you're able to jump into another dedication potentially sooner than if the archetype only had class feats, which is a nice bonus to these particular archetypes. I don't think I can talk about archetypes without mentioning the free archetype variant rule. Most tables use it as it grants you a free feat every 2 levels that can be used specifically for archetype feats and dedications, allowing you to keep pumping feats into your archetype without having to sacrifice your main class feats. But that's archetypes summed up, so on to the list. Number 1, Medic. Medic requires training in medicine and that you have taken the battle medicine skill feat. And for those watching that don't care about healing classes whatsoever and about to skip ahead, consider this proposal. Would you like to be able to heal yourself for up to 75% of your max health for one action that only requires a free hand? Sounds good, doesn't it? Just keep that in mind while I talk about Medic. You don't necessarily have to heal others with it. I accidentally wrote necessarily in my script instead of necessarily, and honestly that sounds pretty awesome, so I might start saying necessarily from now on. Anyway, so Medic is also a phenomenal archetype for those who do want to heal others, as this archetype can effectively turn any class into a healer. As mentioned previously, it does require the battle medicine skill feat, which I'll quickly go over now. Basically, once per day, you can use the Treat Wounds exploration activity during an encounter for one action. It does require a free hand and that you're wearing or have equipped your healer's toolkit, and that 1 day cooldown is per person. And do note that with the healer's toolkit, just like other tools, it says that if you're wearing them, and you can generally wear up to 2 bulk of tools on your person, you can draw and replace them as part of the action that uses them. So that does mean that battle medicine only costs 1 action so long as you have a free hand. And as Treat Wounds scales with your proficiency in medicine, the amount healed from battle medicine increases as you increase your medicine skill. As for the roleplay flavor for that ability, by the way, I like to imagine that battle medicine is kind of like in the Far Cry games where you quickly bandage up a wound, pull out a bullet with tweezers, or snap a dislocated limb back into place, etc. There's videos on YouTube with these actions, and I'll link to one in the description, but only watch if you aren't squeamish. It's just nice to have an actual roleplay explanation for why you can only do this like every so often. Back to Medic. Upon taking this dedication, your medicine skill is immediately boosted to Expert, which allows you to make high proficiency checks which increase the amount of health healed. Plus, Medic gets bonuses anyway on health healed with battle medicine and treat wounds, and they're also able to use battle medicine more often on creatures, and this gets better as your proficiency in medicine increases. At level 4, you can take the Doctor's Visitation feat, which allows you to stride and then use battle medicine or treat poison. This means that you can move and then do battle medicine for one action, which is kind of mental for an archetype that practically anyone can pick. Of course, as you level, Medic just gets better and better and better, so we'll leave that there. Choose this archetype if you want to be able to heal like a madman. Next in the list, number 2, Beastmaster. Beastmaster requires training in nature, and that's it. This is one of my favorite archetypes in the entire system. It immediately gives you an animal companion upon taking the dedication, which effectively means that any class in the entire system can have an animal companion so long as they're trained in nature. I genuinely feel as though animal companions are a little bit overpowered in basically any system I've seen them in. Pathfinder sort of balances this by making it cost you an action to command them, but still, they're an extra body on the battlefield that can help flank with allies, take damage, and even damage enemies. These benefits cannot be understated. Yeah, sure, their AC and health is usually going to be a bit lower than the average Marshal, but you know, it's still extra HP on the battlefield, plus it's only 1 action to command, and it gives them 2 actions, which effectively gives you 4 actions every turn. So as you start leveling up Beastmaster, you can start nabbing additional animal companions if that's your jam. Although you can only really have 1 out at once, that is, unless you grab the Lead the Pack uncommon feat at level 16, which actually allows you to have 2 animal companions out at once. There are limitations on how this works, but it's still freaking awesome. My recommendation at level 4 is to grab the Mature Beastmaster companion, which allows your animal companion to get 1 action every round, whether you command them or not. The animal companions from Beastmaster get access to feats basically as quickly as Druid animal companions do, which is slightly better than what Ranger animal companions get, which is just the cherry on top of this amazing archetype. Beastmaster does get a lot of feats, so I'll leave this one there, so choose this archetype if you want an animal companion that happens to scale extremely well. Moving on to number 3. Bastion. Bastion requires that you have the shield block general feat and nothing else. Taking this dedication immediately gives you the reactive shield feat, which is effectively the theme of this archetype. This is a reaction that allows you to raise your shield and increases your AC rather than having to spend an action during your turn to do so. Obviously this comes at the expense of not being able to use shield block because you've just spent your reaction raising your shield, but that's still pretty awesome if you need to increase your AC by up to 2 for a reaction. And aside from the Viking archetype and the fighter class, as far as I'm aware anyway, there's no other way to grab this feat without picking Bastion. At level 10, you get Quick Shield Block, which gives you another reaction at the start of your turn that can only be used for said shield block. This means that you can indeed reactive shield and then shield block, which is tankiness gone mad. And at level 12, you can take the Mirror Shield feat, which allows you to reflect a spell back at its caster, which is just super cool, unless it was a fireball, in which case it's super hot. Choose this archetype if you want to turn your character into a shielded tanking machine, which I guess would just be an actual tank, just without the cannon at the front. Wait, is that still a tank? Next up, number 4, Acrobat. Acrobat requires that you're trained in acrobatics. Crazy, right? This is one of those dedications that when you first look at it, you'll probably just think, oh, whatever, I don't care about being an acrobat. But you will be wrong for thinking that, you silly, silly sausage. I mean, it's probably not silly to think that. It is called Acrobat, after all. So, first of all, it makes you an expert in acrobatics immediately, which is nice. But then you can grab the Contortionist feat at level 4, which you can use outside of the bedroom. Taking Contortionist gives you the Quick Squeeze skill feat, and I'm staying quiet on that one. But when you become a master in acrobatics, you can squeeze past enemies at full speed, and when you escape from an enemy using acrobatics, the enemy's off guard against the next attack you make against it. For one level 4 feat, this is quite a lot of stuff. Then at level 6, you can take the Dodge Away reaction that triggers when an enemy attacks you in melee. This just immediately gives you a +1 circumstance bonus to your AC against that attack. And if it misses you, you can step straight away, which might force the enemy to close the gap, and that costs them an action and might trigger reactive strikes from one of your allies. And once you're a master in acrobatics, you can step 10 feet instead of 5. This is just a nice little bonus reaction, which is honestly really fun. At level 8, the Show Off feat becomes available, and this is an uncommon feat with a faction requirement, but the flavor for it and actual mechanical benefits are ridiculously good. You basically have to succeed at an acrobatics or athletics check that is particularly challenging, and on a success you gain temporary hit points equal to your level. And that's doubled on a critical success, and they last for a minute. That's just really awesome. And you can use it both in and out of combat, so if you're in a dungeon and you need to use acrobatics or athletics to get over a trap or something, you can do that, and maybe those temporary hit points will protect you from the next trap you come across. Also at level 8 is Tumbling Strike, which allows you to, for one action, make an acrobatics check against the reflex DC of an enemy. You basically just move to the opposite side of them and then get to make a strike. And this movement does not trigger reactions. To top that off, if you get a critical success, they're also off guard to that strike you make. This is one of those feats that just allows you to immediately start flanking with an ally without having to spend an extra action, etc., because you get to strike with it as well. It's crazy good. The last feat I'll mention for Acrobat is the level 10 Tumbling Opportunist, which is a free action. You can use this once per minute as long as you have tumbled through an enemy or used Tumbling Strike. You attempt to trip them using that free action, using acrobatics instead of athletics, which is again, absolutely amazing. Acrobat is just a super powerful archetype, honestly, and the name puts off a lot of people, but it's ridiculously good for so many different types of marshals. Choose this archetype if you want to use acrobatics to devastate your enemies. Number 5, Blessed One. Blessed One has no prerequisites, and upon taking it, you immediately gain the Lay on Hands focus spell as well as a focus point. For any Blessed One skills, Charisma is your spellcasting attribute. Obviously, gaining 1 focus point and Lay on Hands, one of the most powerful focus spells in the entire game, for 1 feat is phenomenal by itself. But as you level up, you can turn that Lay on Hands into a much more powerful version of itself, similar to the choices that the champion gets offered. At level 4, you can take the Blessed Sacrifice feat, which gives you Protector's Sacrifice, which is a reaction that is a focus spell, which means you get another focus point. Protector's Sacrifice basically just means you take damage from an ally, which is pretty good. If you're at the back and not really getting hurt all that much, it's a great strategy to tank a bit of damage for an ally. Your tank may thank you for that, or get annoyed because you're stealing damage from them, but you just skip healing them next time if they want to get pissy about that stuff. At level 6, you can take the Mercy feat, and you can spend 2 actions instead of 1 with your Lay on Hands to attempt to counteract a condition. And you can take more feats later on to make this more powerful and cure more conditions. This is one of those archetypes that can honestly work rather well as any type of class due to it not having prerequisites. Obviously, healers would appreciate it because it gives them Lay on Hands, which you could probably power up with the Reach spell shape to increase its range by 30 feet. And even tankier characters can take this feat so they can Lay on Hands themselves while they're on the front lines, but just bear in mind it probably does trigger reactions as it has the Manipulate trait. It's also just a great dedication to take if you want to pump in a few more focus points into your character build ASAP, as by level 4 you'll have 2 more focus points minimum. So choose this archetype if you're after a few extra focus points, or if you want a repeatable healing spell that gets very powerful indeed. Moving on, number 6, Dandy. Dandy's prerequisite is that you're trained in diplomacy and nothing else. This is another one of those archetypes where a lot of people will see the name and probably roll their eyes. But when you take it, you immediately become trained in deception and society, or you become an expert in any that you were trained in. And you gain the influence, rumor, downtime activity, which is okay, but the 2 extra skills are definitely where it's at. At level 4, you get an extremely powerful feat, Gossip Lore, which is a specific lore skill, meaning that any DC used with it should be a little bit lower than the standard DCs, and you can use this feat to recall knowledge on any topic. And if you fail, you get the effects of the Dubious Knowledge skill feat, which basically means you'll be told one thing that's true and one thing that's false. This feat is kind of mental. Recall Knowledge is one of those actions which new players don't tend to use all that much, but advanced players use it in basically every fight because they know how powerful it is. And Gossip Lore allows you to do a lower DC recall knowledge check on any topic or any type of enemy. Very, very powerful for a level 4 feat. You could also take the uncommon level 4 feat Tut Tut, which is a free action that kicks in once you hit a creature that allows you to attempt to intimidate everyone within 30 feet of you with a +2 circumstance bonus. Again, this is very powerful for 1 feat, especially at level 4. I don't quite know how tutting would scare people, but maybe you're one of those people that can terrify others by just giving them a death stare, and thus tutting is basically the same as actually murdering them. Dandy also gets another uncommon feat at level 8 that allows you to, once every 10 minutes, stride and have enemies make a will saving throw, and if they fail, they cannot use reactions. So this potentially allows you to move through a group of enemies without triggering any reactions. I'd say after this, Dandy gets some hit and miss abilities, but overall it's quite a powerful archetype. Choose this archetype if you want to become trained or expert in deception and society immediately, or if you want to superpower your recall knowledge checks because you hate your GM. And don't worry, they'll hate you too. This is a joke, GMs always love their players, definitely. Every single one of them, 100%. Next in line, number 7, Marshal. Marshal requires that you're trained in martial weapons and either diplomacy or intimidation. Taking this dedication allows you to become trained or expert in one of those skills, and as long as you're conscious, you have a 15-foot emanation, which grants you and your allies a +1 status bonus to saving throws against fear. Marshal kind of reminds me of a sort of battlefield commander who's in the middle of things fighting with their allies, and I guess it's not all that surprising considering we do have a class called the Commander, which should be coming this year and has that sort of exact theme. So you actually get a decent amount of choice of feats at level 4, but the 2 that I'll mention here are the Marshal stance feats, and they depend on whether you go for a diplomatic Marshal or an intimidating one. For diplomacy, you can take the Inspiring Marshal stance, which makes you do a diplomacy check for 1 action, and on a success, everyone within your aura gains a +1 status bonus to attack rolls and saves against mental effects. If you fail that check, there's no other effects, but if you critically fail, you cannot do it for another minute. This makes it very similar to the Bard's Courageous Anthem, with a more limited range but practically unlimited duration due to it being a stance so long as you stay conscious. For intimidation, the Dread Marshal stance gives you a +1 status bonus to damage rolls, and if you or an ally crit an enemy, they are frightened 1. This is so long as you succeed at an intimidation determination check against the standard level DC. And the damage for this scales well, as the +1 damage is per damage die. Again, if you fail the DC, you could just try again, and also again, this is a stance, which makes it pretty amazing. At level 6, you can take the Rallying Charge feat, which for 2 actions allows you to move up to your speed and then make a strike. And if you damage an enemy, each ally within 60 feet who saw it gains temporary hit points equal to your charisma modifier that lasts until the start of your next turn. A nice sort of mini heal in a way. It's pretty awesome. You can use the Topple Foe reaction at level 10 that allows you to trip an enemy so long as an ally hits them and you're both adjacent to them. I could keep going with this because this archetype gets a ludicrous amount of really awesome feats, including Reactive Strike, but I better stop there. Choose this archetype if you want to buff and inspire your allies using diplomacy and/or intimidation. Rolling on to number 8, Mauler. Mauler requires that you have a +2 or higher in strength, and that's it. This archetype is kind of self-explanatory. It specializes in two-handed weapons, and upon taking this dedication, any two-handed martial weapons are now treated as simple weapons, meaning that basically anyone can take this dedication and gain the trained proficiency with all martial two-handed weapons. Also, any two-handed advanced weapons are treated as martial weapons, which could give you access to advanced two-handed weapons straight away, which is potentially excellent. And once you become an expert in any of these weapons, you gain the critical specialization effect also. A lot of the feats for this archetype feature already in the fighter feat list, but even if you were playing as a fighter, you could still take this dedication so you could pick other fighter feats instead, while still gaining access to these two-handed feats. But there are some unique feats here too. Clear the Way at level 6 allows you to shove 5 enemies away from you and then stride half your speed, and you don't increase the multiple attack penalty until after you've done all these shoves. I particularly love the level 14 feat Hammerquake. You choose a square within your reach, including your own space, and you basically get to pick adjacent squares and attempt to strike and then trip every enemy there, and your MEP doesn't increase until after the trip attempts. It costs 3 actions, but it's totally worth it and then some. At level 16, you can grab Avalanche Strike, which has you make strikes to every enemy within reach without increasing your multiple attack penalty until afterwards. It is late game, but it's quite powerful. Really, Mauler is great for those wanting to boost their two-handed weapon skills. Choose this archetype if you want to utterly destroy enemies with massive weapons. On deck is number 9, Archer. Archer has no prerequisites, and it's quite similar to Mauler in a lot of ways, and it kind of speaks for itself. Well, obviously it doesn't speak for itself, or I wouldn't be having to speak right now. Why is that even a phrase? It literally makes no sense at all. Nothing speaks for itself except humans and like tape recorders or whatever. But yeah, taking this dedication will let you treat any bow and crossbow weapons as simple weapons, and any of the advanced versions of these are martial weapons, kind of similar to the Mauler. Archer gets lots of feats that are available to the fighter and ranger specifically, but again, there's some unique ones in here. It gets its own version of Quick Draw called Quick Shot at level 4, which basically works the same way. Full crossbow users can get Crossbow Terror, which allows them to interact to reload and then intimidate to demoralize. And you get a +2 circumstance bonus to that check if you succeeded with a strike on that same turn. Double Shot may be a fighter feat also, but it's still pretty awesome as long as you have a ranged weapon with reload 0, such as a bow, as you can make 2 strikes against a separate target without MAP, and each of them only takes a -2. I also love Parting Shot at level 6, which allows you to take a step back and shoot an enemy who is off guard against that attack for 2 actions. Very fun. And I love the level 8 feat Archer's Aim, which allows you to make a ranged strike for 2 actions with a +2 circumstance bonus to the attack roll. Potentially very powerful, especially considering a lot of bows have the deadly trait on them as well. If you demoralized or distracted or did both or whatever and then did this ability, potentially crap tons of damage. Of course, as you level up, you get more and more powerful ranged abilities, so if you're playing a ranged class, this one's absolutely worth looking into. Choose this archetype if you want to beef up your ranged martial abilities. Last on the list, number 10 has got to be Wrestler. Wrestler requires that you're trained in athletics, and that's it. This is one of those dedications which, again, you can kind of figure out for yourself from the name alone. However, it doesn't mean that you have to put on a mask and start pile driving people, although that is pretty fun, and I recommend you do it to strangers in real life. No, I don't, that was a joke. What a sorry state this world is when you have to clarify that people shouldn't pile drive as strangers. Ugh. So Wrestler gives you bonuses to grapple type abilities, which can be very good for frontline meat shield type characters. I've said it before in one of my previous videos that grapple is probably the best tanking ability in PF2E, and Wrestler enhances that. Upon taking this dedication, you get the Titan Wrestler skill feat and become an expert in athletics. You also no longer take the -2 circumstance penalty for making lethal attacks with unarmed attacks, and you gain a +2 circumstance bonus when resisting opponents' attempts to grapple or swallow you whole, and all of those are definitely going to come in use. Again, there's a few feats in here that some classes already get, but there's some unique ones too, such as level 4, where you can grab Suplex. Once you grab a creature, you can make an unarmed melee strike, and on a success, they land prone, and on a critical success, they take 2d6 bludgeoning damage on top with the strike damage. It's pretty good, and it's also pretty fun to roleplay. At level 6, you can grab Clinch Strike, which is a reaction that triggers when an enemy escapes your grasp. So basically, you just give them a whack, which is really awesome. Submission Hold at level 8 is pretty fantastic as well. You do an athletics check to grapple the creature you've already grabbed, and on a critical success, they're enfeebled 2 until the end of its next turn, and then they're enfeebled 1 for a minute. On a success, they're enfeebled 1 until the end of the next turn, all for 1 action. It's pretty cool. Aerial Pile Driver at level 10 is 2 actions once you have an enemy grabbed that has you literally pile driver them. This does 1d6 additional damage per weapon damage die after an initial unarmed melee strike. So I guess you can put on a mask and start pile driving everyone, just not strangers. Choose this archetype if you want to buff up your grapple abilities both for tanking and for extra damage. And that's my top 10 archetypes for Pathfinder 2e. I did have a few runners-up, such as the Herbalist. Since the remaster, one of its most powerful feats, the level 6 expert Herbalism, isn't actually in Player Core 2 along with the archetype itself. That doesn't mean that you cannot use it, but I didn't want to include it just in case. Still, Herbalist is pretty phenomenal if you want to heal your allies, probably in between combat. I'll link to a Reddit post where user Myriad Star has written up the maths and even put a nice spreadsheet out for you. Suffice to say, this archetype can heal for a stupid amount. Scroll Trickster was also in my runner-up list, and you should check it out if you want a few more spells per day or want to cast them from another tradition using scrolls, potentially for free. Student of Perfection 2 is on the list, and definitely check it out if you're a monk and want some cool elemental abilities. Sadly, I didn't have as many spellcaster archetypes in this list as I would have wanted, but I honestly find them to be extremely limited, as you only really get access to a few spells throughout your entire archetype progression. I'd probably say that you're better off going for the multi-class archetypes if you want spells, such as the Sorcerer. But now I would like to hear from you, my beautiful, loyal viewers. What are your favorite archetypes, and did this list fail to include one or more of them? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll try my best to respond to each and every one of you, as ever. And as always, if you enjoyed this video chapter or found it helpful or informative, please give it a like and consider subscribing. It's always a joy to get such positive feedback from my lovely viewers. But for now, this is Dominic of the Dominomicon, wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.